Today's episode is sponsored by Midwest Fire. For more than 20 years, Midwest Fire has been manufacturing high-quality tankers, tanker pumpers, and fire rescue vehicles in the United States and Canada. Keeping firefighters safe while enhancing their capabilities is what they do best. To learn more, go to MidwestFire.com.
We can dance, everybody look at your hands. We can dance, everybody's taking the chance. Safe to dance, oh it's safe to dance. Yes, safe to dance.
Hello and welcome to episode 242 of the Situational Awareness Matters show. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this program is to help improve situational awareness and high-risk decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-stress, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SA Matters mission is simple. We want to help you see the bad things coming and time to avoid bad outcomes. I'm coming to you today from Fort McMurray, Alberta, Canada, where I've just completed 9 of 15 situational awareness programs that we're delivering to oil refinery operators at Syncrude, Canada. And while I'm here, I also delivered 2 programs for first responders throughout the region. In today's feature segment, it's a continuation of a series of flashback episodes that I'm running from the early days of the SA Matters show. When the show first launched back in 2014, I had amazing guests who shared some incredible near-miss stories. The problem is the show was new, really new, and we had not gained much of a followership yet. Well, at least not like the followership that we have today. So I want to give those listeners and viewers who were not with us back then an opportunity to learn from some of those powerful stories. Now, for those of you who may be watching this episode on the SA Matters TV YouTube channel, the interview that's coming up is an audio-only segment because we were not recording video interviews of our guests back then. Everything leading up to that is going to be a video, and everything following the interview will also be video. Before I jump into the feature segment, though, I want to take another moment to mention a special offer on an enrollment in the SA Matters Online Academy. Most first responders have received little or no training on situational awareness and high-risk decision-making. And this might be funny if it were not so tragic. Did you know that issues related to situational awareness and flawed decision-making are among the leading contributing factors in near-miss and casualty reports? And many times the issues that lead up to the casualty might have been avoided or prevented if the responder or responders had developed and maintained strong situational awareness. I'm on a quest to fix this problem, and I really want to help improve your safety and your decision making. And I really want to help you to be able to go home safely after every call. And I hope with all my being you share this goal with me. And if you do, please let me help you. I've put together an incredible offer for fire departments that I'm extending through the end of the year. Your department can enroll up to 100 members for a flat fee of $2,999. Let me give you an idea of how good this deal is. The regular tuition rate for the Academy is $199 per student. If you enroll up to 100 of your members, you're going to get it for $29.99. That's an incredible, incredible discount. I mean, if you did the $199 times 100, that's like $19,000. You get it for $29.99. If you have less than 100 members to enroll, that's still a great bargain. To learn more about the Academy, just go to the SAMatters.com website and click on the green box on the right side of the homepage labeled Online Academy. If you want to learn more and you want to talk to me, just send me an email at support@richgassaway.com or give me a call at 612-548-4424. Okay, let's jump into our feature segment, part 2 of my flashback episode, where I interviewed Eric Dreiman discussing a flashover event that if the circumstances were just slightly different, it could have killed him. So that's not an easy thing to do on a search, is to turn to your partner and say, tap him on the shoulder and say, we are now abandoning the search for the victim, and we are in full bore save ourselves survival mode. And I'm sure you probably didn't use those words, but that's probably similar to what's going through your mind. So what was it that triggered this, that caused you to? That's a hard decision to make. I mean, you got to make one of the toughest decisions that we make, and that is, it's time to save ourselves. So talk me through that.
Yeah, well, ultimately the defining point for me was when I started to see those little fingers of, basically just, if you can just imagine, for those people who have been through the flashover chamber, they know what I'm talking about, or witnessed a flashover, but just little strips or fingers of flame just suspended in midair, floating through the air, not attached to anything. That's basically, the fire gases inside the structure have reached their ignition temperature, and they're spontaneously lighting off. That was ultimately what made me decide that we needed to go. But there are other things leading up to that. The increase in temperature, and then suddenly the rapid increase in temperature, as well as the change in the smoke conditions. I started to notice that the carpet was getting sticky, which I had experienced before at on other fires. When the carpet's hot enough that it's melting, it's pretty hot in there. And our to a certain extent, with our fire gear being the way it is nowadays, we're so encapsulated. You have to take into consideration those visual cues, those sensory cues that you're getting outside of how hot it can be, because sometimes it can be much hotter than you realize because of our gear. But it was a combination of things, and one kind of built upon the other. But when I knew it was time to go was when I saw those fingers of fire just above my head coming across the ceiling. And at that point, you commented about a difficult decision. At that point, I pretty much knew that either there wasn't anybody in here, or if we had searched the most tenable portions of the residence. So if there was someone in there and they were still viable, we would have found them. Given the rapid change in the internal environment of that residence, I pretty much knew that if there was still anybody in there, they weren't viable. They were going to be burned up. But at the time, I may have thought about that for a split second. But I got to take care of the firefighter that I'm responsible for, and ultimately myself, and that those two factors, that my partner and myself, and the fact that I knew that anyone that was in there, we'd given them the best chance of survival. If they were towards the rear of the residence, which is where the fire was, then they were probably dead before we got there. But we had searched the most tenable areas in the residence. So,
and how far in were you at the point where you saw the fingers of flames coming across the ceiling? How just give me an estimate of how many feet you were from the front door.
Probably 8 or 10 feet inside the front door.
Okay. Now, the next question is, let's assume that you didn't look up and you didn't see those fingers of flames that were, probably your strongest indicator. Let's say you didn't do that for 10 more seconds.
Mm-hmm.
What would happen?
We probably would have. We definitely would have been caught in a full-on flashover and had to try and work our way back out of it, versus being at the front door when the flash occurred. So yeah, it would have definitely been a different outcome. I have no doubt that I would have been, at least hospitalized at that point, as probably would have Brian, if not worse. But yeah, it was that close. Yeah, it would have been. They say you can only crawl about 5 feet. When you've got 5 feet from when a flashover occurs to get out, or you may not get out. So, yeah.
I know it's hard to think about, but you were at the door, and your gear sustained the kind of damage that it did. Melted the facepiece, melted the gauge off the back, burnt through the shoulder blades. You were at the door when that flashed. Really, all you did was probably move 2 or 3 feet, and you were outside. If you were 10 or 15 feet in when that happened, you might not have made it to the door.
You're right. Yeah.
Did you and Brian have any conversations about this after the incident?
We did briefly. After I got released from the hospital, I got the safety officer, on-duty safety officer, drove me back to Station 19, and just my vehicle was and all that sort of thing. So he drove me back to Station 19. When I got there, Brian and I had a conversation about the fire, as well as the rest of the firefighters that were there. The engine officer, he and I talked at some length, about what he saw on the outside versus what I had experienced on the inside, because at this point I knew we'd been in a flashover, but I really didn't know why. This was when all the UL NIST study information was relatively new, and I'm thinking, did I do something to pull the fire to us? Did we do, should we have, you begin to second guess yourself, especially when you have a close call like that, where you actually end up getting injured to the point where you go to the hospital. Brian and I talked a lot. He was grateful that he got out. He, was appreciative that I made the call when I did and made sure that he got out. I think at the time, Brian was relatively new to the department. He may have had 2 years on the department at that point, but he's new by anyone's estimates, really. So he was kind of taken back by the whole situation, but at the same time, very professional about it. I'm just thankful that he made it out. So, yeah.
Now, when you finished at the hospital, you went back to the station, and they said, just go ahead and head on home because you got these bandages on your ears and stuff. When you got home, I didn't ask you anything before we started recording about your family life, but was there anybody to go home to and have to face with these bandages on? Any family member that you had to explain this to?
Yes, my wife, and my wife is the daughter of a firefighter, so she's grown up around the job, and she knew when I opened the door and was standing there with my duffel bag, she knew something had happened. She didn't know what, but there was absolutely no reason for me to be home, at, 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, whatever time it was, on my duty day in my street clothes with my duffel bag in my hand, unless, I had gotten hurt. So, I explained to her that I got burned at a fire, downplayed it tremendously, didn't tell her how close it was, didn't admit to her that it was a lot closer than it was. Of course, she was concerned about, she's a nurse as well, so she wanted to know all about, my burns and what I was supposed to do to them, and and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, my wife was there. I've got 3 boys. They were all home as well. They were pretty young at that time, so they knew Dad got burnt. But Dad says he's okay, so he's okay, and that was kind of the end of it for the boys. My wife pressed me on several different occasions, wanting to know more and more about it, wanted me to explain to her what happened, and I think it was probably 4 or 5 years, just within the past year maybe, of that fire and what happened that day, that I finally owned up to my wife and explained to her, how close it was and how much of a near miss it was, and so I didn't want to talk to her about it. I didn't talk to a lot of people about it for a long time, simply because I felt bad that it happened. I feel like as the officer there, I should have identified some things a little sooner maybe than I did. Ultimately, the outcome was okay. Nobody died that day, but I had a lot of doubt about the decisions that I made that day for quite some time, and only within the last year or so I've started to talk to people about it, and that's part of the reason why I reached out to you, because I feel like I've learned a lot from the experience dwelling on it for the last 4 or 5 years, and I now do a program for our recruit academy. I have a PowerPoint presentation that I've put together, and I talk to recruits in the fire academy through this fire and what happened, and we do it in conjunction with the flashover chamber training that we do for the recruits while they're in recruit class. So it's been good for me to kind of talk about it, and I hope that it's a learning experience for other people, so that maybe they can avoid experiencing some of the things that I did that day with the burns and things like that. So
there's no doubt that anybody that's listening is going to be learning from this. But I want to back up a little bit. Why did it take you 4 to 5 years to talk to your wife about this?
Well, because I almost died that day. Your wife, you don't want your wife to, people talk of the, you get up and you go to work and you never know if you're going to come back home the next day and all that sort of stuff. Those are kinds of, it's kind of the unwritten or unspoken word, that, a spouse probably has, any spouse has, whether their husband or wife is a policeman or a fireman or in the military or whatever. But I just didn't talk to her about it because I guess I didn't want to have to own up to the fact that it was as close as it was, and that 2 feet farther away from that door, and she probably would have been getting a call from somebody else or a knock on her door telling her that either I was in the hospital or worse. So I was kind of embarrassed by it, and I didn't want to add to her concerns or fears, when I go to work. So,
how old were your boys then?
That's 5 years ago. So they were 9, 6, and 2.
Any special feelings you had when you put them to bed that night?
Oh yeah, for a long time after that. But definitely, people talk about, when they get home from a run that involves kids or a bad run, you hold your kids a little tighter, you hug them a little longer, those sorts of things, and all that went through my mind, and I experienced all those feelings, and I know children and wives of other firefighters who have died in the line of duty, and I know how difficult it was for their families, and continues to be for their families, and I'm very thankful that my wife and kids aren't having to live through that. So,
what lessons did you learn? If you were to share out with people listening to the show the takeaways, the things that you would want them to know, maybe part of what you're including in the PowerPoint to the recruits, what's the lessons?
Well, one of the first lessons I would say is that when when I rolled up on this residence fire, I'd been to plenty of fires throughout my career that were similar to this one. You know, this was a 1,100 square foot house. Fire showing from the rear. You know, we go in the front, we push the fire out the rear. Fire goes out, we high five everybody, and everybody goes home. Pretty routine deal. This fire made me realize that no matter how routine you think a run is, you've always got to be prepared and anticipating and assessing for something unusual or unsuspected to occur to you. So never take a call for granted, I guess, to summarize that. Never treat something as routine. Very thankful that I had all my fire gear on and had it on appropriately. It's pretty routine for us to wear our Nomex hoods, turnout gear buttoned up, and all those sorts of things. Don't take for granted opportunities that you have to train on fire behavior and reading the art of reading smoke and those sorts of things. I've told many people that when I was a recruit in the fire academy, I went through the flashover chamber as a recruit as part of my initial training, and over the years, my involvement in training here with the Indianapolis Fire Department and across the state and other places in the United States has grown significantly. I now teach the flashover chamber portion of the fire academy class to our recruits every year, and I directly contribute the fact that I got out of that fire and identified those conditions being what they were to my first experience as a recruit going through the flashover chamber, and now as a trainer taking people through that flashover chamber. Had I not had those experiences in my career, I don't know what decision I would have made that day. I would like to think that I would have made the same decision, but having been through that and been involved in those programs over the years, just tremendously beneficial to the fire service to go through those programs. I'm a ladder guy at heart, so I like to give the engine guys a hard time. But don't take your engine companies for granted, because we can't do it. Ladder companies can't do it without engine companies, and vice versa. So don't take your engine companies for granted either, I guess, as a humorous sidebar. So.
Mm-hmm. What advice would you give to somebody about how to make that decision when you're inside that it's time to go? Tell them what you would want them to know about making that call, because that's a tough call. Yeah,
for me, it really boiled down to the amount of heat that I was feeling, and knowing that I was wearing structural firefighting gear and was wearing an SCBA, and I realized that the temperature had increased drastically. A civilian laying in that environment in street clothes with no self-contained breathing apparatus, you just have to realize, people need to realize that person's not viable. They're not going to still be alive. You take care of yourself, you take care of your partner, and then you take care of the public. And I had pretty much written the public off based on the environment that I was operating in. Had there been someone in there, I was pretty confident that they were beyond being rescued anyway. So at that point, my concern turned to my partner, and I had to make the decision to get out. So And I really didn't consider it a hard decision at the time, just because, based on the conditions that we were in, I kind of knew that, if it was bad enough that it was going to kill us, then anybody else that was in there was probably already dead. So.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And did the department do any kind of after action, review or analysis of this call?
No. At the time, quite honestly, it was document. I mean, the safety officer has a packet of information that he fills out anytime that a firefighter is injured in the line of duty. Basically an incident narrative. My turnout gear was quote unquote confiscated. They took all my turnout gear. They sent my coat and pants off to the gear manufacturer. They sent my gloves off to the glove manufacturer, my hood, so on and so forth, for the different manufacturers to evaluate and basically try and learn something from, gather any information they could from the damage that was done. Mm-hmm. But as far as an internal investigation, there really was none. The injury packet was completed, and I had to write out what happened from my perspective. But that was really the end of it that day. Had I been hospitalized, I think there would have been a more thorough investigation or evaluation of the situation. Mm-hmm. But in the grand scheme of things, I got some burns on my ears, damaged my fire gear, obviously, but I got discharged from the hospital and I went home. So, mm-hmm. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that's just kind of the way it turned out, because it was, more or less considered a relatively minor incident at the time. Looking back on it now, I realize it was much more significant than I probably even gave it credit for. So
if you were to, on shift now, sitting in the right front seat of a ladder, pull up to the same call, same fire conditions, same engine to follow you in, mm-hmm. Would you do anything differently now that you've had this experience?
Well, given the unknown, whether or not somebody was in there, I know one thing that I do kick myself for is not being a little bit more proactive. I think had I been a little bit more proactive and maybe helped Brian get those searches done, we may have been either through all the house that we could have searched and been back outside before the room flashed, or just identifying, instead of waiting to see those fingers of flame and feel the carpet starting to melt. I think I probably should have reacted a little bit quicker when I started to notice the change in the smoke conditions and the rapid increase in the temperature, and probably at least have been working my way back towards the door, so that if I did need to call Brian to me to get out in a hurry, I already had the door located and was in a better position to help him exit, rather than having to fumble in the smoke-filled room figuring out where the door handle was and delaying us, the few seconds that delayed us initially. But like I said, it was a pretty routine looking fire when we pulled up. There was nothing about it that raised my hackles really, or concerned me. Been to lots of them before, been to lots of them since, and it, from the exterior, the conditions didn't didn't lead me to believe that it was going to be anything more than routine. Obviously the fact that it was a meth lab burning and there was Lord knows what chemicals involved probably exacerbated the fire conditions beyond what normal residential contents would. But I would say that I would still make the entry. I would still do the search. I would probably just be a little bit more cognizant of my orientation and pay more attention to those smoke and heat conditions. I think I did let my guard down somewhat because, as I mentioned, initially in this conversation, the hand line was right there at the front door with an officer and a firefighter standing there just waiting for water. So I think I kind of took for granted that they were coming through the door any second and we were all going to be okay. So that kind of I definitely let my guard down there because I've been in the same situation before. I mean, we routinely, the truck crews here in Indianapolis will oftentimes make entry prior to the engine company to initiate a search. It's not what I did that day is pretty much normal operating procedure for us. I just, because obviously there was a delay in getting water, and Mr. Murphy showed up at the exact wrong time, as they say. So,
Did the engine attempt to contact you and tell you they were having difficulty getting the water, or was there just not enough time? I mean, we're talking about a really small window of time here, but was there anything communicated about a delay in water?
Not that I recall over the radio. I know that Lauren, the engine officer, made a couple of different attempts to yell at the engineer and tell him to charge their hand line, and for whatever reason, the engineer wasn't. I think there was a delay with getting the hydrant, the water supply hooked up, and there was some confusion there with the firefighter that caught the hydrant and the engineer. But anyway, Lauren did all of his communication with the engineer on the engine for just face to face, basically, or yelling across the yard. One thing I do know, I know there was radio traffic on the radio throughout the entire time that we were in there, because you've got companies who are announcing their order of arrival. You've got the battalion chief arriving on the scene, assuming command, all those sorts of things. But I honestly don't recall hearing any of that stuff on the radio. I was fixated on doing the search and keeping an eye on the conditions inside while I was waiting on that hand line to come in. And I know you've talked on other interviews and other things that articles and things that you've written about time time slowing down or
distorted.
Distorted. And I can definitely say that I felt that way. When you asked me how long it was between the time that we crossed the threshold and initiated our search until we came back out, the reason I've thought about this for so long and dwelt on it and really wondered was because it seemed like 10 or 15 minutes we were in there, but I know we weren't. It was only, best I can guess from talking to the guys from the engine who were standing on the front porch, screaming and hollering for their line to be charged, was a minute to a minute and a half. Definitely not over 2 minutes, but so I would definitely say that I felt like I was kind of operating in slow motion, even though it was obviously real time and then some, because we were in such a rush to get out. So,
wow, it's an amazing story. Holy cow! Thank you so much for giving me the gift of time and sharing this lesson with the fire service. There's so many takeaways. I was trying to I'm going to have to go back and listen to the episode again because my note-taking couldn't keep up with how fast the lessons were coming. But I got 10 of them. I got 10 takeaways documented, which is just powerful to share that. Thank you so much, Eric.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Thank you, Eric Dreiman, for participating in this interview and sharing your lessons learned with our listeners and viewers.
Welcome to Chief Miller. Chief Miller operates the largest social media page dedicated to the men and women of the fire service from around the world. Check him out on Instagram at Chief_Miller. Find him on Twitter at Chief_Miller. And check out the website where you can find Chief Miller Apparel at chiefmillerapparel.com.
Since 2007, the SA Matters instructors have helped more than 1,200 organizations and more than 67,000 individuals improve high-risk decision-making, including first responders, industrial workers, military personnel, business leaders, medical professionals, utility workers, highway workers, school bus drivers, aviation workers, oil refinery operators, and more. If you work in a high-risk, high-consequence decision-making environment, then we're here to help to improve your safety and your survival, and to help you accomplish the most important mission of all, and that's to go home to the ones who love you. I would like to take a moment to thank and honor the companies, organizations, agencies, and departments that have hosted recent Situational Awareness Matters training for their team members. The Anderson County Fire Department in Anderson, South Carolina. The University Heights Fire Department in University Heights, Ohio. The International Association of Fire Chiefs Volunteer and Combination Officer Section Symposium in the Sun in Clearwater Beach, Florida. The Rogue Interagency Training Association in Medford, Oregon. The Shoreline Fire Department in Shoreline, Washington.
I think Rich's ability to connect with any crowd, that's a gift that he has, and it's easily transferable.
This is the second or third time that I've heard him speak. There's some teeth to the information that he brings.
It's been really good. Good mixes. He knows when to throw in a joke here and there to get you back involved.
Some tools. I'm a new lieutenant, so very, very interesting. And some of these things I can take back to the station and use with some of the new firefighters I have on my crew.
Something to get you thinking about your job more, big picture type stuff. I've seen him before. A good review for sure.
I have heard him before, yes. After he speaks, there's usually an enlightenment because now they're more aware of what's going on around them and what they're experiencing as they're responding to calls.
He's very, very knowledgeable. I'm enjoying it so far.
And that intuition, that's a big one. The video that he just showed up here, we're getting a lot out of this. I think this is a really good seminar, especially for new people and old. But I think it's very informative. This talk gives us more ammunition to do all three. They're relatable to what we have experienced or very well could experience, so he makes it easy to let the knowledge sink in.
I mean, it's awesome. A lot of stories you can usually relate to yourself and calls you have been on, the aha moment. Like, he just helps you focus on picking out the right things. It's awesome. It's a refresher and keeps my eyes open. It's good stuff.
If people listen to the message that he has, it's an incredible message delivered by a very compassionate person. Strategy and tactics are going to always change. Situational awareness it doesn't change. It's always there.
He's got some good stories to tell, and he's very thorough with his stories, and it's interesting listening to him.
Very clear speaker, and he talks on our level because he's been there, he's been in the trenches. I think he's doing well, and I'm looking forward to the second half.
If you're interested in attending one of our programs, here's where we're going to be upcoming. From now through December 11th, we'll be at the Syncrude Oil Refinery in Fort McMurray, Alberta, Canada. January 3 through 9, we'll be back at the Syncrude Oil Refinery in Fort McMurray, Alberta. January 12th at the Quad County Fire Chiefs Association in Lewiston, Idaho. January 15 to 16, the Pearland Fire Department in Pearland, Texas. January 26th, the Toledo Fire Department in Toledo, Ohio. February 2 and 3, the Missouri Winter Fire School in Columbia, Missouri. February 22nd, the West Virginia Emergency Services Conference in Pipestem, West Virginia. March 4 through 8, the North Shore Tour across Minnesota, covering the cities of Grand Rapids, Hibbing, Mountain Iron, and Lutsen. March 12th, the Maryland Fire Rescue Institute's National Fire Service Staff and Command Program in Towson, Maryland, March 25 to April 3, the Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard in Oahu, Hawaii. To see the locations of all the upcoming Situational Awareness Matters tour stop events, just head over to the samatters.com website and click on the blue box on the right side of the homepage labeled Live Training Dates. If you're interested in hosting a program, just click on the Contact Us tab on the top of the SA Matters homepage and I'll give you a call. If you want to become part of the SA Matters community of learners, there's several ways that you can do that. Just check the show notes at the bottom of the episode for how to get connected with us on our newsletter membership, podcast subscriptions, and on the social media channels of Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you. I was losing it. Twitter. There we share ideas about how to improve situational awareness and improve high-risk decision-making. Well, that's it. Episode 242 of the SA Matters show is complete. Thank you to my guest, Eric Dreiman, for sharing your lessons learned with our listeners and viewers and helping improve their safety. Thank you to all the agencies and organizations that have hosted live Situational Awareness Matters tour stop events. Thank you to all those who have hosted the live virtual internet-based training events. Thank you to all the students and graduates of the highly acclaimed Situational Awareness Matters Online Academy. Hey, remember that special that I'm offering on the Academy through year end. Check that out. And most importantly, thank you, the listeners and viewers of this show, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gassaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit samatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gassaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgassaway.com.